This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Thousands pay their respects to Chadian President Idris Deby at a state funeral in N'Djamena. Over 100 migrants feared dead as a boat capsizes off the coast of Libya. And the African Union urges member states not to waste COVID-19 vaccines over expiry concerns. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me in studio is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Billionaire Elon Musk launches a new 4-astronaut team to the International Space Station. And poultry producers in South Africa are worried about the impact of an outbreak of avian influenza. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. We start the hour in Libya, where at least 120 asylum seekers are feared dead after their boat capsized off the coast of the country. The shipwreck was found northeast of Tripoli. A distress call was reported on Wednesday morning from a rubber boat with 130 people on board. Charities and the UN Migration Agency say the migrants were attempting to reach Europe when the tragedy occurred. CGTN's Adel Al-Mahrawi has more.
European charity rescue organization SOS Mediterranean has been leading the search and rescue mission for the migrants' boat, an operation the organization says lacked participation from government maritime support. 3 merchant boats joined the organization's rescue ship, the Ocean Viking. They reported finding only 10 bodies around the site of the Zodiac's boat's wreckage, which reportedly carried around 130 migrants. It was found northeast of Tripoli. On Thursday, the organization confirmed that no survivors were found. Weather conditions were hard this week at the Mediterranean, with waves 6 meters high challenging navigation. The International Organization for Migration said it was saddened by the devastating accident and demanded more international effort. SOS Mediterranean announced that it received 3 distress calls from migrant boats this week. Some 41 migrants drowned in another wooden boat that also capsized across the Tunisian coast. Additionally, Libyan coast guards managed to intercept a 4th boat in international waters and brought it back to its shores. So far, 350 migrants have perished in this dangerous journey from Libya to Europe through the Mediterranean. The figure does not include the 130 migrants who boarded Thursday's Zodiac. As the weather gets warmer in this region, it is common to see a spike in attempts to cross the sea from Libya to Europe. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
The late president of Chad, Idris Deby, has finally been buried at Amjaras, a small village close to his birthplace in the east of the country. A state funeral took place earlier in the day in the capital, N'Djamena. Several heads of state were in attendance, including French President Emmanuel Macron. And as CGTN's Deji Badmus reports, the passing of Deby is widely seen as a blow in the regional fight against jihadists in the Sahel.
To many in the troubled Sahel region, President Idris Deby Itno was seen as the bulwark against jihadists seeking to entrench a reign of terror across the region. Having built up the Chadian army into a well-respected fighting force, he deployed his troops to wage several successful battles against jihadis across the Sahel and even in next-door neighbor Nigeria, where Boko Haram operates.
If you consider what Idris Deby did with relation to the insurgency and the attempts to relatively stabilize the West African sub-region with regards to, acts of violence committed by non-state actors, insurgency, Islamist fundamentalists, and all of that, you will realize that he was at the heart of the attempt to stabilize the region. It was very clear.
Chad has been central to the operation of the G5 Sahel force set up to fight jihadists. It also hosts the headquarters of France's anti-jihadist Operation Barkhane and the West African Multinational Joint Task Force. There have been concerns over the likely impact of Deby's death on these initiatives and the wider fight against insecurity in the region. But analysts say with the son of the late leader taking over power in Chad, things may just continue to hold, at least for the short term.
The transition has provided some element of stability. But then we need to look beyond that, because we're analysts and we see a bit beyond what is in the obvious. Now, what was the reason for the rebellion, the rebels that killed Field Marshal Idris Deby? What were they complaining about? They were complaining about the political space that has been shrunk with the exit of Idris Deby, and perhaps a bit of uncertainty whether his son, who, let's remember, is a greenhorn in politics. Yes, he may have a military career, but then this is his first foray into politics. So there is a lot of uncertainty on whether he will be able to balance the politics in Chad.
France, a key ally of Idris Deby, has openly expressed support for the new transitional military council in Chad, led by his son Mohamed Deby. Other regional leaders too appeared to have followed suit, knowing that any serious conflict in Chad could have potential impact on the entire West and Central African regions. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, now that Chad has bid farewell to its long-term leader, a key figure in the fight against the Sahel's militant insurgency, what lies ahead for the country? We spoke to Dr. Manu Lekunze earlier. He's an African security scholar from the University of Aberdeen in the UK.
I think for us to really understand what Deby's legacy is to first of all ask what kind of Chad has existed throughout the 30 years of Deby's leadership. The most important thing is to think about Chad as a very unique country, despite all the generalizations that have been made about Chad since the passing of Deby. Chad is a unique arrangement in Africa where Chad is essentially a military state, and the military essentially under the control of an individual. And this arrangement of a military state is more or less guaranteed by an external actor, and in this case, mainly France. So you have a kind of state where the military is effectively in charge. The stability of the military, as we've seen from time to time, is guaranteed by an external actor, where when something is going wrong, as in the case of rebels, the French will intervene to make things go back to normal, or the role that France plays discreetly to ensure coup-proofing in Chad. So will that kind of system continue in the absence of Deby? Yes, I think that system will continue, because I do not see how this is going to be immediately changed in the short term. So the arrangement which Deby played a significant role in maintaining that militaristic state will continue in Chad, in my own opinion, in the short term. Of course, there are going to be fights on who should be the leader, how elections could be conducted. The rebels will want to take over, but these are very difficult and challenging things to achieve. So in the short term, we are going to see more of a Deby 2.0 going forward, which is simply a state completely or effectively controlled by the military, and the military effectively influenced by an individual.
World leaders are attending a virtual summit on climate change hosted by US President Joe Biden. The summit has seen some of the world's biggest polluters announce ambitious carbon emissions targets. John Terrett has the latest on day 2 of the meeting from New York City.
First session today is called Unleashing Climate Innovation. So that's all the equipment that can be made and built in order to help the situation, the apps that might be brought online to help people, the training courses that they may have, all that sort of thing. And then the second and final session is called Economic Opportunities of Climate Change. And I think that speaks for itself, really. There's got to be a lot of economic opportunity for everybody in the world as we move forward with this issue. Now, today we have the big CEOs and billionaires taking part in this event, by which I mean specifically Bill Gates, who has just spoken in the last 10 minutes or so. Of course, Bill Gates used to head up Microsoft, is now a philanthropist in charge of the Bill Gates Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He gives a lot of money to climate change issues, as does Mike Bloomberg, who we know very well in New York because he was the three-term mayor of New York City. You may remember he ran for the Democratic Party to try and win the White House last year. He didn't do very well, but he is a philanthropist and he does give lots of money to climate change issues. And then the presidents that we're going to be hearing from today, you know, 40 leaders have been taking part over 2 days. Today we'll hear from the presidents of Nigeria, Poland, Spain and Vietnam.
Well, Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for stronger global cooperation on climate change, saying the world needs to step up compliance with environmental commitments to the UN and the Paris Agreement. He was addressing that two-day US-led summit attended by 40 other world leaders. Fiang Yile has more.
His Excellency.
Chinese President Xi Jinping called for joint efforts in battling climate change as world leaders gathered for an online summit Thursday. The event is seen as an important juncture in the global climate political process before the 26th UN Climate Change Conference postponed last year takes place in November.
We need to work on the basis of international law, follow the principle of equity and justice, and focus on effective actions. We need to uphold the UN-centered international system. We need to comply with the UN framework on climate change and the Paris Agreement, and strive to deliver on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals.
Xi reaffirmed that China will live up to its carbon emission targets to hit peak by 2030 and achieve neutrality by 2060. This is after the country fulfilled its 2020 target ahead of schedule. And Xi pledged to rein in coal.
Support is being given to pioneers from localities, sectors, and companies. China will strictly control coal-fired power generation projects and strictly limit the increase in coal consumption over the 14th five-year plan period and phase it down in the 15th five-year plan period. We support COP26 in achieving positive outcomes.
The US-led summit also comes as Beijing and Washington have agreed to work together toward concrete actions in climate governance. The result of talks between US climate envoy John Kerry and his Chinese counterpart Xie Zhenhua.
We will continue to have dialogue and exchanges in 8 key areas: decarbonization in industrial and power sectors, development of renewable energy, green and climate-resilient agriculture, energy-saving buildings, green and low-carbon transportation, cooperation on methane and other non-carbon dioxide greenhouse gas emissions, cooperation on emissions from international aviation and maritime activities, and other recent measures, like reducing coal and gas emissions.
President Xi called on developed countries to support developing countries. As he told European leaders last week, climate change is a common cause of all mankind and shouldn't be a geopolitical bargaining chip. As the world's largest developing country, China is pledging to achieve benchmark goals in a much shorter time frame than most developed countries.
China's 3060 goal poses a major challenge for one of the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitters, but the Chinese president sees it also as a chance to upgrade the economy and a foundation for a sustainable future. Feng Yilei, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, for more on this, let's take a listen now to Thomas Emmanuel, a climate change activist and environmentalist from Lagos, Nigeria. He gives us the African perspective on resolutions from the climate conference.
Whatever the US, Russia, China is doing in their countries, they would have to do more than in their countries. They would have to focus on outside their countries too, particularly on developing countries like Nigeria, because whatever they do in their countries won't really matter, because we all feel the impact of what Nigeria is doing if Nigeria does nothing. Coal is actually is not a good option. Coal is disastrous. We know that coal contributes to air pollution, water pollution, wherever it is disposed. So it is not a good option for Africa. Africa, what are the options for Nigeria, for Africa? We're talking about clean energy from solar, from water, from air, that's wind energy, biomass energy, geothermal energy. And Africa, as you know, we have access to sunlight very good amount of sunlight. One of the challenges that developing countries are having presently, particularly in Nigeria, is corruption, transparency in the process. And truthfully, pressure is being mounted on them by foreign nationals, foreign countries that are developed. Most foreign countries are pressuring most developed countries are pressuring developing countries like Nigeria with ideas that are not traditional to Africa or to Nigeria. And this will not work. They need to be having more resources, developed countries having more resources and more information and intelligence need to help Africa to monitor and fight against corruption and to make its process transparent. And then I heard something about climate aid. Africa has, yes, climate aid is good, but when it's brought in and there's corruption, it will be a waste. So Africa needs to battle corruption. Africa needs to make its waste transparent, particularly Nigeria.
Well, let's take a short break now. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The African Union urges member nations not to waste COVID-19 vaccines over expiry concerns. And nearly 1 million people in Mozambique in need of food assistance. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Mimi sijapiga nyongolo wase pale kuna wase wengi. Ninachezanga na dada yangu juu pia mimi sipendi kukufa. Hii ilikuwa ni asili yangu ndo pia familia yangu pia iweze kukula. Kwa hivyo mimi nacheza na dada yangu, akili yangu na macho yangu.
Kibira yenyewe ilikuwa mbaya kitambo, kulikuwa na wezi wengi sana. Na siku hizi yenyewe hata unaweza kaa bila kusikia hata mwizi ameshikwa mahali ama amechomwa ama amefanywa nini. Ndio naona yenyewe Kibira raundime si kama kitambo.
We only need a tool to bring change. And this tool to me, it can be educational background, it can be a skill, it can be a hobby of what you love.
I wanted to use my expertise in the media to nurture that talent, to mold them to become the future journalists.
The African Union's disease control body is urging member nations not to waste COVID-19 vaccines. The Africa CDC says countries should wait for further guidance on recently expired stock. The statement came as Malawi said it was planning to destroy 18,000 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca jab, which expired in mid-April. Malawi says it administered 80% of the 100,000 doses it received from the AU. South Sudan has also set aside 59,000 expired doses. The Africa CDC says it's been told by the manufacturer in India that the shots are still viable and safe until mid-July.
The initial shelf life was 13 of April. The Serum Institute is saying, based on the analysis, that you can actually use it to 13 of July. But please do everything. These are smaller donations. Do everything to use the vaccines as quickly as possible. So that is the situation. And it is my appeal to all member states that when you get your vaccines, arrange and put on the right systems to use those vaccines quickly, so that we do not get into the issues of we get the vaccines and because of transportation, shipment in country.
Well, meanwhile, the Africa CDC says the continent's vaccination rollout is behind schedule. The health body says only 0.34% of Africa's population has been fully vaccinated. So far, African nations combined have received close to 37 million doses of vaccines. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more.
New COVID-19 cases remain on the rise in Africa, and the continent has so far recorded a total of 4.4 million cases. The death toll is also getting higher by the week. More than 118,500 people have died so far.
We recorded an overall total of 2,100 new deaths across the continent. That represents a 15% increase compared to the previous week.
So it's the rapid rolling out of vaccination that the continent is now relying on to prevent more death and further disruptions in socio-economic activities. John Nkengasong, director of Africa CDC, says countries are moving ahead with better vaccine acquisition and administration, although the continent remains behind in its plans.
A total of 36.2 million vaccine doses have been acquired by member states, with approximately 15 million doses being administered. That corresponds to a coverage of about 0.8% at the continental level, with 0.34% of population having received a full vaccination regime. So you can see that we are still far away from our target.
What the director there was saying is that Africa has targeted to vaccinate at least 60% of its over 1 billion population. Compared to that plan, the continent has a long way to go in its vaccination efforts. However, with the better vaccination jabbing performance of nations like Nigeria, Rwanda, Seychelles, Morocco and Ghana, experts say it won't be long for Africa to hit its targets. And for that, Africa is standing by to receive several 100 million vaccine doses from across the world. That, of course, includes the Johnson & Johnson jab.
Are we on course on getting the 400 million Johnson & Johnson? Absolutely, yes. We've signed the contracts. We are mobilizing countries to go in and get their doses as much as possible. So I think we are on course for the Johnson & Johnson doses.
Africa's CDC director said the J&J is a convenient one-shot vaccination with a very good efficacy record. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
China and Egypt have agreed to create a COVID-19 information sharing program. The system aims to facilitate travel between the two countries. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more details.
It will be a QR code-based system that will provide information on the COVID-19 health status of people in China and Egypt.
It eases procedures to check if you have your PRC test or got vaccinated, instead of requesting these papers and documents at the embassies, airports and other places. It's all computerized and easy to access.
The QR code offers another service. If it lights green, it means there are no health issues in the person. If it's red, it means the person needs to be quarantined. This helps authorities to take quick action based on the information provided by the passenger's home country.
The Egyptian government has ratified the deal, described by some as a new mini passport.
The documents, which are meant to ease movement between both sides, will also benefit different sectors of the economy.
Sectors that are related to travel, such as tourism.
It will not have a direct effect on tourism, but it will help determine what % of residents in the destination city has been vaccinated. The higher the percentage of vaccinations, the more comfortable tourists are to travel these areas.
Businesses would benefit as well.
China is a very important trading and investment partner to Egypt. So many Egyptians travel to China and Chinese come here for business. The QR code would facilitate procedures and travel for them, and this promotes trade. We are in a time of pandemic. Shutting down travel has hurt economies worldwide. The QR code idea will help resume travel safely.
What has helped this initiative go through is the closer Sino-Egyptian ties. Most of the jabs used in the North African country are from China's Sinopharm. Egypt will also begin locally manufacturing Chinese vaccines to cover its over 100 million population and will export to the region. Yes Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Uganda is considering reopening its borders to refugees following an influx of illegal entries through porous border points. Ugandan Minister Musa Ishweru says refugees fleeing violence from the Democratic Republic of Congo pose a risk as they could spread Ebola and COVID-19. Our correspondent Isabel Nakiria brings us that report.
Refugees fleeing conflict in the DRC are currently crossing through unmanned points without being screened. Uganda has relaxed some COVID-19 measures but maintained the closure of borders to refugees due to the fear of COVID-19.
They are not going through our normal system where we would isolate them for some days, screen them to ascertain whether they have Ebola or COVID-19. But they are crossing through the porous borders and mixing with the citizens of Uganda.
That policy could change now in an effort to better monitor people arriving in the country. In July last year, the country temporarily reopened its borders to some 3,000 refugees but closed them again days later. The refugees that were allowed in were tested for COVID-19 and quarantined for 14 days before being resettled. Uganda is host to 1.4 million refugees, mostly from South Sudan and the DRC. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Let's turn to Japan now, where a state of emergency has been declared for a third time in Tokyo, Osaka, and 2 other prefectures following a resurgence of COVID-19 infections. The state of emergency will start on Sunday and last through May 11th. It requires restaurants, bars and karaoke parlors serving alcohol to close and for large sporting events to be held without spectators. The announcement comes just 3 months before the Summer Olympics are scheduled to begin. Phoebe Amoroso has the latest from Tokyo.
The head of the Tokyo Organizing Committee, Seiko Hashimoto, said earlier today that the games will go ahead as planned, and they're scheduled to update what's called the playbook, the rules that athletes and people attending must abide by in order to control restrictions. So that involves things like athletes move around in bubbles. They're going to be increasing the frequency of the daily testing of the athletes. And earlier this week, we heard the International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach give his full support to Japan, saying he has no doubt it is going to be a very safe and secure Olympics. But of course, now with the state of emergency and government experts saying that it may be extended should cases not fall, there are some serious question marks as to how this can go forward. Added to that, public sentiment is strongly against the Games. 70% want the Games to be postponed or cancelled according to recent polls. So there are definitely some challenges lying ahead, and Japan and I think the world will be watching to see how they manage to bring this infection situation under control.
India has reported over 330,000 new coronavirus cases, the world's largest single-day increase. Health authorities say deaths also jumped to over 2,000 in just the past 24 hours. India is facing its worst outbreak since the start of the pandemic. Canada has suspended all passenger flights from the country for 1 month starting Thursday, while flights from India are already banned in New Zealand, Hong Kong and the UK. The World Food Programme says that nearly 1 million people in Mozambique are in need of urgent food aid. Northern Mozambique has been plagued by a 3-year insurgency that has led to worsening violence and displacement. Jane Keogh reports on the aftermath of a recent attack in Palma.
In late March, assailants struck Mozambique's Palma town in the Cabo Delgado province. The attack largely targeted civilians who were shot and beheaded in their homes and on the streets. An estimated 50,000 people fled the 5-day rebel siege of Palma. Some journeyed as far as Tanzania across the border.
They're killing us. They're burning houses and they're taking our children. They're killing us with guns. We're desperate about the situation.
We traveled for 6 days with no food. I had brought some food for the journey, but it only lasted 3 days. For the remaining days, we had nothing.
The World Food Programme says it's delivering food to the affected areas as well as other coastal islands.
What we've seen is that over the last month, since the initial attack on 24th of March in Parma, people have scattered. Scattered meaning they have just gone in different directions. And the landscape of northern Mozambique is such that the coastline is sort of dotted with very small little islands. So you can even go to one island, but then have to travel another 2 hours to another island, and people are just moving. Why are they moving? They're moving for safety.
Those who have been displaced have been taken in by families that are already poor. WFP is calling for assistance amounting to $82 million to respond to the humanitarian crisis.
What we're also seeing is that chronic malnutrition in Cabo Delgado is high, and half of those are children. So the most vulnerable, there was a recent survey that we did with UNICEF where they're accounting for a high percentage of children amongst the displaced community as well as the host community as well. So that's something to be really aware of in terms of children who are underweight, but also suffering from chronic malnutrition as well.
The heat on Palma has affected liquefied natural gas projects in surrounding areas. Francis Total has called off resumption of construction at its $20 billion project due to the violence. Stakes remain high for Mozambique as it becomes more crucial to restore peace in the north of the country. Jane Keogh, CGTN.
And let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Billionaire Elon Musk launches a 4-astronaut team to the International Space Station. And poultry producers in South Africa are worried about the impact of an outbreak of avian influenza.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor, to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off with the news that U.S. rocket company SpaceX launched a 4-astronaut team on a flight to the International Space Station. Now, this is the first crew ever propelled into orbit by a rocket booster, which is recycled from a previous space flight. Within 10 minutes of launch, the rocket's second stage had delivered the crew capsule to Earth's orbit, traveling at nearly 17,000 miles per hour. Now, the crew is due to arrive at the space station, which orbits some 400 kilometers above Earth, early Saturday, following a flight of about 23 hours. The mission marks the second operational space station team to be launched by NASA since the U.S. resumed flying astronauts into space last year. It follows a 9-year hiatus, and of course the mission is a result of NASA's fledgling public-private partnership with SpaceX, the rocket company which was founded and owned by Elon Musk. Musk is also CEO of electric car maker Tesla. And moving on now, South African poultry producers are worried about the impact of an outbreak of avian influenza. The latest infection of the bird flu was detected on a chicken farm east of Johannesburg just over a week ago. Now, some nations neighboring South Africa have already suspended poultry imports. Health and agricultural authorities are trying to contain the flu, but as many of these nations head into winter, the threat of further infection is still high. Here's Sumitra Naidu with more.
The avian influenza was detected at an egg-producing farm in Gauteng last week. Samples tested positive for the H5 strain of the virus, which is similar to the outbreak that occurred in 2017. The farm has been placed under quarantine after around 300 birds were culled.
Poultry meat is not affected at this point in time. They don't have the outbreak on a broiler farm. It's on an egg farm. This particular farm of 240,000 hens represents less than 1% of the national flock of egg-laying hens in South Africa.
3 neighboring countries have already banned poultry products from South Africa. This includes Mozambique, which relies on 70% of its egg supply from South Africa.
It's most unfortunate that they have imposed an outright ban, unlike Namibia, in our opinion, who's been the most sensible of all, in that they have banned products from a particular, what they call a compartment or an area where surrounding this farm that was diagnosed with HPAII. So the rest of South Africa for Namibia is still open to export to.
Test results have shown that the flu is highly pathogenic and can spread. On Monday, authorities visited another site where 24 birds have died in the last 24 hours.
Risks that it actually presents in my space is that if it actually is not contained within the area that it actually broke out in, and it manages to get to my farm, then it could in turn affect my investment.
In January, Sibanda discovered that a common respiratory disease was affecting her flock, resulting in crippling losses to her new operation.
I had a batch of about 2,500 chickens, and out of the 2,500 chickens, we lost about 900 chickens in a space of 2 weeks. And at some point we had to, as an entrepreneur, I had to come to a point where I had to make a decision. What do I do, especially with the older birds? Because as you know, with older birds, you can't really cure them. So you have to decide, okay, do I stop administering medication and slaughter 1,000 birds? Who am I going to sell 1,000 birds to as a small scale farm? I had to slaughter those birds, and luckily, we managed to contain the actual disease, and we had to tighten up our biosecurity.
Poultry exports fell 20% after the last outbreak in 2017. The industry has recovered since, with exports to SADC countries pushing 54,000 tons in the last year. But there are concerns that this outbreak could cause another decline if it is not contained soon.
There was tremendous loss of livelihood in that period. But we've learned a lot since then in terms of the biosecurity protocols and the quarantine protocols.
Farmers are calling on government to initiate a vaccine program. Birds carrying the disease are flying from countries going into winter, making it very difficult to manage. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, a group representing 800 Chinese companies say they want to invest in Tanzania. They held a meeting with President Samia Suluhu Hassan in the country's capital, Dodoma. Here's CGTN's Isaac Lukando with more.
The Chinese Chamber of Commerce in Tanzania has congratulated President Samia Suluhu Hassan on becoming Tanzania's 6th president. its over 800 members say they are keen on investing in a number of projects in the country, including the manufacture of mobile phone handsets.
We are having some plan to set up big industrial park into the country, and in the industrial park we'll be having a fairly big number of factories to manufacture different products ranging from like mobile phones, pharmaceuticals, even assembly of cars and other kind of products.
The Chamber says it also envisages enabling Tanzanians to acquire skills through an education program that will provide opportunities to study in Tanzanian and Chinese universities. It is also expressing optimism over Tanzania's economy.
Tanzania will be now going to a fast track of economic development. And from our Chinese community, we know that all the people are reacting very positively, that the country now is going right direction towards economic development. This is what we are excited and we are hoping for.
China is already the largest foreign investor in Tanzania. Figures from the Tanzania Investment Center show that it now leads with investments worth $5.9 billion. On her part, President Hassan says the government will work to resolve various issues that affect the flow of investments in the country. These include work permits, tax, delays in payments for delivered service, red tape, as well as taking precautions against the COVID-19 pandemic. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, let's move on now. On the evening of April 23rd, China's State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi held a video conference with the Council on Foreign Relations of the United States. Now, during the conference, Wang Yi congratulated the CFR on its 100th anniversary. He also made 5 points on how to view China-US relations from a strategic perspective. Now, first, he said China hoped that the United States would have an objective and a rational view of China's development. Second, China hoped that the United States and China would explore a new path of peaceful coexistence and win-win cooperation. Third, China hoped that the United States will respect and accommodate the path and systems that China has independently chosen. Fourth, China hoped the U.S. would practice true multilateralism. And fifth, China hoped that the United States will refrain from interfering in China's internal affairs. The Chinese foreign minister also reiterated China's positions on Taiwan, Xinjiang, and Hong Kong. He called on members of the CFR to continue to contribute wisdom for promoting China-U.S. cooperation and, of course, safeguarding world peace. Now, shifting back to the continent, Kenya's flour industry is turning to solar energy to save cost and mitigate the impact of climate change. The sector is amongst Kenya's highest sources of foreign exchange and uses electricity to power greenhouses.
The irrigation systems and cold stores in Rift Valley Roses, a flower farm located in Kenya's Nakuru County, require lots of energy input, resulting in high running costs of electricity.
Kenya has a real struggle to supply enough power to the corners, all the corners of the country. We live day to day with day-to-day problems of consistency of power from them, and it's a very high cost to us. We have actually no control on that cost. So we knew the big picture. We had to get more reliant on natural resources of power.
Though Gordon has determined to go solar, the space available to install a solar power system is limited. However, a company, Ecoligo, which was founded to pioneer the global energy transition in emerging markets, came up with an idea of using the farm's water reservoir for photovoltaics. This is Kenya's first ever floating solar system.
It reduces the evaporation of water in the reservoir, so that means you have to pump less water. It also reduces algae growth, which means that you have to use fewer chemicals. It means your water is cleaner, more easy to directly use, for in this case, to water your flowers or other crops. And it also actually increases the yield, the production of each panel, because the water has a cooling effect on the panels.
Though the benefits of installing a solar power system is clear, financing still stands as a challenge when it comes to emerging markets like Kenya. But Ecoligo found a solution.
We used the funds we raised from our crowd investors to lease the system to Rift Valley Roses over a number of years on a lease-to-own contract. So that's why Rift Valley Roses and other companies have chosen right now to go solar, because they can cut their costs in the middle of the pandemic. They can take a power purchase agreement over a number of years, and later on they will get the solar power plant transferred to them.
As the flower farms weather the storm of the pandemic, the innovative way they use energy is also contributing to a cleaner planet, presenting a double benefit.
We've recovered pretty well from that initial shock of the pandemic, making the house a happy place. When you've been stuck inside, flowers are a natural thing to buy. So the market is improved and our production is there. So we hope obviously it will continue.
Flower exports are one of the top 3 foreign exchange earners for Kenya. In 2019, the sector generated 104 billion Kenya shillings in sales. The adoption of new strategies to save energy could limit the impact of the pandemic on returns and promise long bloom for the sector. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, Egypt and Russia announced the resumption of direct flights between the two nations. That, of course, is after a ban of more than 5 years. All that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Ruche. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Cameroon makes its debut on the global streaming platform Netflix.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
It's all pomp and fanfare in Cameroon's western town of Buea as filmmakers and actors gather for an international film festival this week. Now, this comes as the Anglophone region tries to go back to normal despite an ongoing secessionist conflict. The event will celebrate some high-profile films, including 2 that have been bought by United States streaming service Netflix. CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma takes a look at one of them.
Renee Etta shot the movie The Fisherman's Diary in Limbe in 2019. The drama is about a young Cameroonian girl determined to go to school. It is inspired by the story of Pakistani activist Malala Yousafzai.
I've been informed that there's a girl here by the name of Eka who's been attending classes without her father's permission. I am still talking. No child will step his or her feet on this premises without her parents' consent.
This movie it has a very, very vital message that talks about girl-child education, which is a very, very sensitive topic that a lot of societies today still go through. So me playing Teacher Bibi, who is this motivational teacher who comes in to bring in light into the life of this girl who is Eka, to achieve her dreams, to go back to school, to achieve an education for herself. That was a big role for me to play.
The film was featured during the Cameroon International Film Festival. The festival was cancelled in 2019 and 2020 because of the conflict between state forces and English-speaking rebels. COVID-19 worsened the situation.
I'm so happy to be here again. I cannot believe I'm seeing all of those people after a long time, more than 2 years, I think. And it's so amazing. I'm so happy. I mean, we're finally back. Kamif is back.
Before the pandemic, we had the crisis. Okay, it shut down a lot of projects, and people were thrown into jail. We still have filmmakers in in prison till date because their opinions were misunderstood or their opinions went against one person or the other with the power to put them away.
No, Papa.
At the festival, The Fisherman's Diary is one of 2 Cameroonian films that have been bought by US streaming service Netflix.
I'm so elated, I'm so excited. This is something that has been long coming. We've been waiting for it, and for it to finally materialize, and we have our movies on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all the big platforms. I could say that's a very, very big breakthrough for the Cameroon film industry, and I'm so happy.
Etta is now counting on the growth of the cinema industry in Cameroon to encourage a younger generation of filmmakers.
Not just for us, but African film industry is growing bigger. We can now comfortably tell our children, if you like cinematography, you want to do films, go ahead and do it, because there is a future, there's a possibility you can make a living out of it. So.
Book in order to do anything for woman picking.
What are you doing? Most films made in Cameroon are made in the English-speaking regions. Cameroon's 2 Western Anglophone regions have been gripped by fighting since 2017.
She's called Malala.
But for now, a fragile calm reigns in Buea during the festival, which runs for a week. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa.